G'day everyone, welcome to another video by myself, Andrew DFT. And of course today is a continuation, of course part 2 of the how-to plasma pistol tutorial. Now of course when we left off we had it relatively on its way, but of course we need to go ahead and complete a whole lot more features to really make it the final piece that we want. Now of course remember you're going to take extra distances and add lights, customized features. In this one I've just done this as a blank area. If you want to take that out, hollow it out, put an acrylic sheet over with an LED underlay, that'll look fantastic. Of course that's not something I'm teaching, you can go off and do that yourself, but I'm sure we're going to see many of those in the community in no time. Otherwise I'll stop wasting time talking, let's jump right in and get this thing finished. Alright, so where we left off we of course had the bottom of this gun done, so we'll jump now and work on the top half. We'll follow the exact same process as primarily what the first tutorial had, so we'll grab the template and we'll slowly transfer some of the detail. We'll work from the middle and work our way down, slowly excavating a way to give it a bit more of a 3D appearance. So simply by transferring that layer, then using the technique you did last time by cutting down on a 90-degree angle and then excavating one of those layers out, you're left with a nice 3D terraced effect. We'll then go add some extra detailing by putting a depth line and a bevel line in here on the sides and trimming those off, giving us a nice curvature to this piece. Now we can move forward and start to work on the handle. Now the handle has a lot of 3D aspects to it, so we'll do our best to cover and get that in, but we're using the same techniques of course that we've used in today's and the previous video. So what we'll do first is of course transfer the template on so we know exactly where all the spaces are. Now we're going to add a depth line about maybe 1/4 of an inch down or at your own thickness, it all depends on what you want, and then you're going to cut that whole layer off so it's excavated down from the top 40mm layer as you can see here, just like we did on that middle section before. Now of course we want to round this off and give it some more detail, so we'll start off first by applying the detail at the base of this handle, which will be a excavated piece as well. So we'll go ahead and add in the perimeter line and then the depth line, and we'll go in with a 90-degree blade and slowly cut down to that depth where the depth line is indicated, and then we'll come back in on the side and actually cut this piece away. You can do this in a few slices and in one solid piece, as the overall section or the excavated part isn't really that big, so you can get it all off in one go. Next we'll go ahead and start adding in some of the interior detail. We'll cut off these little pieces from the template, transfer them on as a negative template, so that way we have them clearly marked there. You might need to go back with a ruler and actually make sure that the lines are clearly defined, but you can then go ahead and excavate those out as well, bringing them to a depth of your choice. You might want to make them go a bit deep as we are going to slowly bevel these edges. You don't want that becoming an issue if you didn't go deep enough. But by beveling those edges, we'll add that perimeter line in, as you can see clearly marked here. It wraps around, and then you can add in the depth line to a depth of your choice, and then we can go in very carefully and slowly take this off. You want to spend a bit of time making sure that you're going around carefully, keeping it all at the same level and the slope is equal across all the pieces with all the lines, and of course make sure that your blade is not exceeding the two lines, the perimeter and the depth, so that way you get a nice even slice. Of course in the interior sections where we've done the detailing, you will need to take it down an extra depth as well, just to make sure that that nice kind of 3D aspect continues and wraps around that nice bevel. Now we've still got a bit more detail to add onto this of course, so what we'll do is we'll grab the top right hand corner of the template and we'll transfer in this little design here. All you're doing is marking it in, then giving it a little excavation just to kind of make it separate from the 40mm top layer of course at the front section of, I guess, the scoping part of the gun. Then what you can do is of course go on to the other side, transferring the perimeter line, add a depth line, and we'll round off the back section of the gun. So now you should have a good idea of how you can actually hold it and decide whether you need to take the depth down or leave it as it is, all depending on how comfy it is to hold the actual prop. Then we can go ahead and start to break apart the template even further and transfer in some of this additional detail to help segment it all out. To do that, simply just grab the template and then chuck in the lines that we need. Of course they might come off a bit strange, but what you will need to do as a key piece is transfer the lines across to the back. Hopefully, because in the beginning of this we made sure that most of the lines were going to work out well, so that way it should be perfect symmetry when you bring those lines back, and it meets up with the other designs of course on the other side. You can then go in and just bevel out those lines, giving it a bit more of a depth, so that way it's not just a standard pen line. Now we'll leave that section for now. We'll actually jump to the top here and of course round off some of this part. We don't really want it to be a hard 90-degree angle. All we're going to do is add the perimeter line, of course, and then the depth line, and we'll slowly go and trim this off. You don't want to do it on a huge hard angle. Try to keep it nice and soft so that way it gives it a bit more of a rounded effect. Of course, the actual plasma pistols are a bit more rounded than this because they are probably thicker than the 40mm size, because grunts are pretty damn chunky. But of course, we're only working with what we have today, so we will do it at a reasonable curvature, but nothing too extreme. Now there's a tiny piece of detail that we can go ahead and add in. Very simple. All you're going to do is cut it out of the template and then transfer it onto the foam where it should be, of course using it as a negative spacing, and then of course just excavate it in, using the same technique we've done for most of the parts that we didn't want to be at that 40mm height. Now we'll also do the exact same to this top part here that we're cutting out. We want this to really be a nice 3D piece, so we're going to take this down a level as well. Of course, use the template to transfer where it should be, and then go in and add your depth line. This can be just below the surface. We don't want it to be too thick. As you can see here, my line is literally just below, as we are going to have to round this off. And if we do it too deep, unfortunately the rounding off might be a bit strange and ruin the top part of your design. So to do this, I've just simply gone in and beveled each line, so that way I know I'm not cutting way too deep. Of course, you can then come in from the top and actually trim off on the actual guided line, and then slowly shave away all the interior excess foam you don't need, and that should give you a nice, flat, even surface excavated down to the depth of your choice. Nice and clean, exactly like that. And of course, you can then sandpaper it later on to make sure it's absolutely clean. But what we'll do now is we'll go in and add in another depth line just below the depth line we added before. And then you can go in with a nice sharp craft blade and actually round that off, so it's nice and curved. Otherwise you'll be leaving it at the 90-degree angle, which isn't ideal. Alright, now we can start putting in some of the extra detailing. Of course, we'll go ahead and cut off the top part here, the front section, and transfer in this vertical line. You can add two of them because of course we're going to go in and now bevel it, so that way it gives it a nice 3D perspective. You just cut down on a 90-degree angle and then come in from the other side and go in on a 45, and that should give it a nice little flush little indentation. You can then take a pen just to smooth it out and make sure it is nice and clean inside. We can now start to work on the almost bird-like beak part of this front part of the gun. To do that, we'll of course cut off the exterior part of the template, and we'll mark it in there and add a depth line. This is exactly the same as we did for the bottom of the handle, going in and excavating out the parts, so that way it gives it a 3D perspective. Now of course we have to go off and round this section off. It is at the 90-degree angle. Now you do want to be careful. What I decided to do is I added the depth line just above the front bird beak part of this gun that we chucked down. That way it gives it a nice additional layer and not meeting up with the actual one down below. I mean, that can be up to you, it's all preference really, but I decided to give it a 3-tiered effect just to make the 3D a bit more prominent. You can then of course continue the design. We want to now bevel off the undercarriage, I guess, the under section, so that way it's not a complete sheer cliff underneath, and this will give it another, yet again, 4th aspect of 3D perspective. So you just simply go ahead and bevel off those edges, and then we can give it a 5th and even more important piece which wraps around the top of this beak, and we can excavate that out to give it another depth and thickness. And well, it's going to look pretty damn cool when you paint it up and you weather it, because there's so much intricate detail here that's giving it a far more dynamic 3D perspective that you couldn't actually really get in EVA foam unless you had a Dremel, and we're pretty good. Next we can go ahead and add some of the detailing in. Easy enough, we're just going to grab the templates, cut them out, and then slowly place them on using a pen to mark out exactly where they go, and then you can go in with a nice sharp craft blade and carve all and each of these out very carefully. Taking your time, as this is a very key piece of detail. You want to make sure it looks good, so don't rush it, just make sure your blade is sharp and you're going at it nice and fine. Now I've realized there's a few things I forgot to actually add, so we'll go back and do those now just to show you. So we'll grab this template here, which is of course the main handle section, and we'll lay in this piece of detail which actually wraps around the design. We can go ahead and actually give this a nice little indentation or excavation to give it a nice 3D depth, and of course build out that 3D appearance. We'll also grab the top compartment and see this perimeter line here, chuck that in, then add a depth line and bevel this edge off. This of course was a 90-degree angle that we don't really want, so we'll give it a nice 3D curve and help wrap it around to complete what is already a nice piece. Then we'll go ahead to the beak part of this gun. I keep referring to a beak because it actually looks like an eagle beak. But what we'll do is we'll go ahead and actually start to transfer some of this detail. Now at the moment it's very bland, it doesn't really have anything, so what I'm going to do is kind of free roam it a bit, but it's a nice, simple and easy way to go about it. So I'm adding in a depth line and a perimeter line. I'm cutting this section free, excavating it from the foam to kind of give it that 3D depth. Now what I'm going to do is now add in some additional detail using some lines and actually excavate out these sections to give them this nice little tooth staple-like effect. You can make this different if you want. I just decided to do it that way as it looks both beneficial and kind of what like a plasma charge rail would look like. Alien designs. I'm an expert at it, right? Moving on, we can now start to do the bridge that holds the two pieces together. Grab the template, chuck it onto the foam, cut it out of the foam, but you will realize it's too thick for the current design we have. So rather than leaving it at the 40mm, I'm going to cut away at least ½ inch of this thickness, bringing it down to whatever, insert math number, and making sure it's thin enough that it sits in between the two beveled edges we've carved. Now once you've got that thickness and you've sanded it away to make sure both sides are nice and smooth, we can start to break apart the template and transfer in all the details. Now I really want to make this look as 3D appealing and aesthetically pleasing as possible, so I'm going to add a lot of different 3D depths and layers to really make it stand out and be prominent. And the easiest way to do that is just to take your time and vary it up with your depth lines. Make some deeper, make some thinner, all depends on how you want it as a final product. And then of course for the internal segments, all I'm going to do is use the template as a negative spacing and carefully transfer the lines. As the paper is rather flimsy, you might not get them in there as well. But as long as you go back with a nice a straight edge and clean those lines up, you shouldn't have a problem when it comes to actually trying to excavate those out to a depth that you're happy with. Then once that piece is all done, really all you need to do is mark out where it's going to sit, so that way when you take it apart and you glue it together, you know where it's going to sit and it should hold there rather nicely. I'm just using some relatively warm hot glue. You don't want it too hot, otherwise it will melt the styrofoam, so usually I leave it running for maybe 2 minutes until it comes out runny, but it's not boiling molten lava. Now a nice little trick I like to do is use the tip metal part of the hot glue gun to actually make some little holes as indentations, almost like screw points, but not so much like screw points. Just little pieces of detail that you'd expect maybe where the metal was bound together. I know it's an alien gun, they don't probably weld, but you get the idea. When you paint it up and you dry brush it, it adds a fantastic looking aspect to it, which I haven't found to match with another technique anywhere else, so nice and easy. Then of course you can go add in the iron sights by simply carving out of a nice little piece of styrofoam and gluing that on top, and then, well, that's it folks. A lovely looking styrofoam plasma pistol. Of course, remember you can take it any step further. If you want to hollow out some sections, do so, and well, have fun with it. So that's it, all done and dusted. I hope you enjoyed the process, and of course if you don't have styrofoam, you can rewatch this, slow it down if you need, and just see the individual steps and then think, how can this be applied to EVA foam? 90% of this process is the EVA foam process. The only thing that's really different is the fact that we can't really extrude the EVA foam like you can with the polystyrene styrofoam. You can do that if you add a Dremel. And of course, this is all one layer, rather than having to apply multiple layers of EVA foam together to get the whole thickness. So there are some differences, but that's why this, in my opinion, is a superior material to work with to get high quality foam, as it does create less of an issue in its construction. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I hope you have enjoyed your outcome and your process of building it. If you want to share your final products, please do tag me in on my Instagram. You can find or Facebook. You can find all those links in the description box below, whichever best suits you, so I can comment and see your progress. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video again. I said that twice. Otherwise, catch you later, guys.